back to my channel. Today is going to be another cooking video because loads of you contacted me telling me how much you loved my last baking video where I made the chałka. If you haven't seen that yet, I'll link it in the description box below, or I'll put a link somewhere in this video, you'll see it now. But it's just September in England and it's starting to feel a lot more like autumn. The weather is getting colder, the leaves are turning orange, and I don't know about you guys, but this time of year I love to bake. I love to have cozy days where I put on classic FM, snuggle up with a steaming cup of tea and a baked treat, and I love the smell of warming spices like cinnamon, cardamom, cloves just in the house from fresh baking. So that's what I love to do in autumn time. So today I'm going to show you how I make cinnamon rolls. I'll also link the original recipe that I used to make these cinnamon rolls in the description box so that you can, maybe it'll be easier for you to follow along. But I hope that this video will inspire you to try them at home, because this is honestly an incredible recipe for really fluffy, moist, rich cinnamon buns, which are just, they really hit the spot in autumn, and it's great for transitional times like at the moment where September's kind of, summer's still lingering but it's nearly autumn, because I feel like this recipe is quite nice. It's a fresh bun, so it's not too sickly or anything. It's really good. So I hope you try it out at home, and without further ado, let's get started. So to make the main dough for the cinnamon rolls, you're going to need 4 cups of strong white bread flour, half a cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of whole milk, 30 grams of fresh yeast, or you can use 2.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast, 2 eggs at room temperature, and a 1/3 cup of butter. So the first step is to grab a pan and to heat up the milk just until it's warm to the touch, because you're going to be dissolving the yeast into the milk to activate it. So I'll pour the milk straight in and put it on a low heat on the hob. I'm also going to put the 1/3 cup of butter into a pan and melt it, because it needs to be melted and then cooled slightly so that it's just warm. While the butter is melting, I'm just stirring it consistently to ensure that it doesn't burn at the bottom of the pan. So while the butter is on the pan, I'm just stirring it consistently with a wooden spoon just to make sure it doesn't burn and stick to the bottom. And now that the milk has heated up and it's warm to the touch, I'm going to add in the fresh yeast and dissolve it in there. So I'm probably going to stir it with my finger just to make sure that it dissolves properly. And just mix it in there with my fingers until it's all completely dissolved. So now that the yeast is completely dissolved in the milk, I'm going to pour that straight into the KitchenAid. So the butter is all melted now, but it's a bit too hot to add to the milk and yeast mixture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into a basin with cold water just to quickly bring it down to about room temperature until it's warm to the touch. And while the butter's cooling down, I'm going to get a whisk and a jug and basically whisk the eggs. You can put them straight into the KitchenAid, which I see most people do, but from personal experience I find that when I bake, if I just whisk the eggs up first into an even consistency, then the things I bake always turn out better and fluffier, so that's what I'm going to do now. So you don't need to whisk your eggs for long, just until they're combined and look a little bit paler. And now I'm going to pour that straight into the KitchenAid. Now that the butter has cooled, I'm also going to add that in and then mix all of the wet ingredients together. So in it goes. The next step is to add in the granulated sugar and then to mix that in. And the last thing to add into the dough is the flour. And I have 4 cups of flour in here, but like I always say with my baking when I make doughs, it really depends on the environment how much flour you're going to need to add in. So I would add it in bit by bit as you're mixing, and just to watch the dough as it goes along. For this recipe, this dough will be a bit stickier because you want the cinnamon rolls to be moist and gooey and just melt in your mouth. So you want a wetter dough to create that result. So do expect that. However, if you find that after adding all this in, the dough just isn't coming together, then you may need to add more, and I would always say just do it like 1 or 2 spoons at a time. I'll show you the result when I add it in so that you know what kind of consistency you're aiming for, but just keep in mind that you have to, with baking, as much as it's good to follow a recipe, you also need to use your own intuition and know what kind of result you're looking for and adjust ingredients as and when to create that result. So I'll just go ahead and start adding it in. So I've just finished combining all of the ingredients together in the KitchenAid, and it's made a lovely dough. It's all come together really nicely. I didn't need to add any extra flour because I think it just worked pretty well today. You can see the dough is quite sticky, but like I said, that's normal if you want gooey buns, so it's going to be perfect, just trust me. So what I'm going to do is take it all off of the hook, and then cover this bowl with a tea towel and let it sit for 10 minutes just to rise and to make sure all of the flour is properly absorbed in the dough. But I'll show you what it looks like. It looks a bit like this. It smells really good. I love the smell of yeast and baking in general. So yeah, like I said, it is quite sticky, but it is coming together as a dough, so it will be fine. I'll just cover this with a tea towel and let it sit. So I feel like my obsession with the cinnamon rolls started when I went to LA for my 16th birthday, because I went to Cinnabon, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is basically a bakery in America that does cinnamon rolls, and oh my gosh, they were amazing. Like, they're massive, they're really huge, and they've got icing on, but they're so gooey and moist and delicious. And since then I've just always loved cinnamon buns, so that really kick-started my love of them. So it's nice to be able to make them at home because Cinnabon doesn't exist in England, and I feel like they're not as popular. Starbucks does them, but they're not the best ones, and I've seen them in some bakeries. Like, luckily there's actually a really good bakery in Bath called Landrace Bakery, which is my favourite bakery to go to for breads, and they make the best, well, they do cardamom buns and cinnamon buns, and there I prefer their cardamom buns. They are just the best things in the world. They're so delicious, but they're very expensive, so obviously making it at home is better. And also, like I said, it's a cosy autumnal activity to do, just baking and listening to classic FM. That's what I normally put on when I bake, and just hanging out with friends or family while I'm baking, so obviously it's more fun to do it with someone else. But yes, I've covered this and I'm going to let it sit for 10 minutes. So now that the 10 minutes up, I'm going to take off the kitchen towel and attach this back onto the KitchenAid and just knead it for about 5 to 7 minutes, just to work the dough a little bit. So after kneading the dough, it's got a lovely silky consistency and it's staying together a lot better now as a dough. It's a lot, I don't even know how to describe it, more elastic and holding together a lot better. So what I've done is I've got another bowl and I have greased it with butter, and I'm going to put the dough into this bowl and then cover it with cling film to let it rise in there. So I'll just go ahead and scrape it out into the bowl. So by wrapping it in cling film rather than just using a kitchen towel, this will prevent the dough from drying out, just to keep it extra moist and gooey when it bakes. So yes, now that is covered in the greased bowl, I'm going to leave it for 30 minutes in a warm place. If your kitchen is on the colder side, you can put it in the oven with the oven turned off, but just the light on to keep it warm. But my kitchen is pretty warm because it gets lots of light, so I'll just leave it on the side for 30 minutes. So something you can do while you're waiting for the dough to rise is to create the filling for the cinnamon buns. So what you're going to need is half a cup of softened butter, half a cup of brown sugar. I'm using demerara sugar, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but demerara sugar, because that has a really lovely rich caramelly taste, and I feel like it really adds something to the cinnamon rolls if you use that type of sugar, but any brown sugar will work. And then 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. or if you like more cinnamon, you can always add a bit more. That's what I normally do. But basically you just want to mix it together to create a paste, because this is going to be spread in between the swirl of the cinnamon bun. So I'm just going to add that right in, and the sugar, and the 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, which I'm going to load up very heavily because I love cinnamon. Like all through autumn, I'm pretty much eating porridge with cinnamon, or fruits baked in cinnamon like apples or plums or pears that I'm just having with yogurt or on my porridge, or just basically I'm having cinnamon all the time. Or I love to bake pumpkin loaves, so if you'd like me to share that recipe, I could always do that as well, because that's a wonderful autumn recipe. And now with a hand mixer, I'm just going to mix that all together. To avoid the cinnamon puffing up in a big cloud, I'm just going to first do it a little bit roughly. So as you can see, this has formed a really lovely smooth paste, which I'll be spreading over the rolls as the filling. And I added actually another tablespoon even, sorry, of cinnamon, just because it wasn't cinnamony enough, and I personally like a lot. But it's up to you how much you want to put in. And if you wanted to put a twist on these buns and not have cinnamon buns, you can always do something else, like you could put another type of spice or flavouring into the filling, whatever suits your fancy. Okay, so now the half an hour is up, and as you can see, the dough, which was about, I don't know, a third of the way up the bowl, is now touching the top of the cling film, so it's risen. I mean, it's at least doubled, if not gotten even bigger, so that is a big success. Oh my gosh, peeling this cling film off, I can just smell the dough. It smells incredible. Oh my gosh, okay, that is like one big cloud right there. So the next step is going to be to flour the surface and roll the dough out into a big rectangle, which I will do now. So I'm just going to, I've got some plain white bread flour, which I'm just going to sprinkle across the surface quite roughly. You don't want too much, just a kind of even spread of flour. Can you hear the seagulls in the background? I always find it so weird, because Bath is not by the sea. It's a good, I don't know, like 2 hours drive from the sea, but it's always filled with seagulls. It's mad, and they're actually so violent. Like the amount of times I've witnessed seagulls attacking each other, or I don't know, just being violent in general. They're kind of scary, and they're so huge. And yeah, I just find it odd that they're in Bath since there's no sea here, but there you go. Okay, so now the surface is floured. I'm going to tip the dough out onto there. Like that. Oh my gosh, it's just one big cloud. I need to bring you closer so you can see how amazing this dough is. I mean, look at that. It's beautiful. Sorry, I'm just really proud of my dough right now, so I thought I had to show you up close. So now with the rolling pin, I'm going to roll this out into a big rectangle without pressing too hard, because I don't want to just get all of the air bubbles out of it, just kind of like a rough roll. Also, I really recommend, if you haven't already, investing in a rolling pin without any bumps or handles on the edges, because I find, let me show you. So this was the rolling pin that I originally had that I always used to use for baking, but as you can see at the edges, it's got a little like indent in it, and when I try to roll things, it always made an indent in the pastry or in the dough or whatever I was rolling, and it was really annoying. And I got this one, and this has just like changed my life, because it just makes everything so much easier, because it just leaves perfect edges on the dough, and because it's rounded, there's not even like a crisp line where the edge of the rolling pin is. It just kind of is smooth and lovely, and so I would recommend getting a rolling pin like this if you haven't got one. But yes, now it's time to just kind of roll this out a bit. I haven't got any specific dimensions to give you for the dough, but when it looks roughly like this, like if you compare the size of my hand, I don't know, like 2 hands up and then about 4 hands across, that should be about right. But basically, like, I don't know, 2 centimeters thick. You don't want it too thin, you don't want to get all the air out, but just roughly rolling it like that. Now I'm going to cover this with the cinnamon paste that I made with the cinnamon, brown sugar and butter. I'm going to just scoop that on here. And then the easiest way to spread this out is just to use your fingers. You can use, I don't know, a spatula or something like that, but I'm just going to use my fingers because that's the easiest way to just spread it all across the surface evenly. So when the filling is spread nice and evenly over the dough like this, I mean, you can see it's not a perfect rectangle, but it doesn't really matter too much. But that means that you're ready to roll it up. So what you need to do is roll it along its long edge to create a big log. So grabbing one end, you want to tightly pull it so that the corner folds over. I don't know if you can see that, but just basically I've folded the very edge across, and then you carry on folding it under as one long tight roll, a bit like a Yule log or a Swiss roll, that kind of thing. And as you can see, I'm not really picking up too much, I'm just pushing it towards me, and that just brings the whole thing together into one big roll. And you roll all the way across. And if you floured the surface, then it shouldn't stick and it should just peel off nice and easily, like so. But yeah, that's what it looks like. I'll give you a closer look so you can see, but basically it's one really big roll. The next step is using a knife to divide it into roughly 12 pieces. So before I cut, I'm just going to kind of try to divide it into 12. So I'm doing it into half, then quarters, and then those into 3. To get a rough idea. Obviously the edges are going to be a little bit smaller than the middle ones, so you can make them thinner and then a bit thicker if you want to try to balance it out. But it doesn't really matter if you have a range of roll sizes, because I mean, if you're hungrier, you can get a bigger one. If you're less hungry, you get a smaller one. So now that you've done that, you can slice it all the way along to create your rolls. And you might smush them a little bit when you slice them, because obviously you're cutting into the dough, but that doesn't really matter, because when they come out, you can just kind of push them together into a circle to reform that shape. And yeah, that's the beautiful roll. So now you just need to cut them into the 12 pieces. And what I've done is I've greased a baking tray with butter, and as I'm cutting the rolls, I'm going to form them back into the circles like I mentioned, and then I'm going to place them in here evenly because I'll be baking in here. So now I have all of my rolls evenly spaced in the pan. It's better to use a slightly bigger pan that's a bit roomy so that they have plenty of room to grow, but obviously if they haven't got room to grow out, they'll just grow up. So I'm not too worried, even though they're a little bit close in this pan, but this is the biggest I've got. So now you're going to have to cover the tray with a tea towel and let the buns sit for a further 20 minutes to rise a little bit more, and then they'll be ready to bake. At this point, I would also preheat your oven to 180 degrees Celsius so that it's got time to heat up before you put the rolls into the oven. So now the rising time is up for the buns, and I'll show you what they look like now. I mean, there isn't that much of a notable difference. They are a bit puffier and larger, and they look fluffier, so I guess that's like the main reason for letting them rise a second time, just to make sure they're extra fluffy when they come out the oven. And there's one final step to actually do before you put them in the oven, and this might seem a little bit strange, but just trust me, this is going to bring the buns to the next level. So with your cinnamon rolls, what you're going to have to do is get half a cup of double cream and pour it all over the cinnamon rolls. You might be thinking, what? Why would you do that? Because that's like the strangest thing. And when I first heard about this little trick, I thought it was really strange as well. However, if you want your buns to be really moist and gooey, which we all want with cinnamon rolls, then this is going to do the trick. So what I do is I'll try to do it in front of the camera so you can see more clearly. I hope I didn't make a big mess. Is just try to roughly get it evenly distributed over all of the rolls. If you just put a bit over each of them, like that, and then just sort of wiggle the tray to get it like all over the bottom of the tray. Then when you put this into the oven, basically the buns or the rolls will just soak up all of that double cream, and it literally makes them just like the cinnamon rolls. So trust me, this is literally the trick, just to get them perfect. And now they're ready to put into the preheated oven. and to bake them for about 20 minutes to 22 minutes until they're golden brown, so you just need to keep an eye on them. So it's quite a short baking time, and then they'll be ready to eat. So I've just taken the cinnamon rolls out of the oven. They look a little bit dark. They're not burnt, but they're quite dark brown, and I'm not sure why, because the oven was on the same temperature as I always put it on, and they were in there for the same amount of time. But I guess they're just going to be a little bit crispier. And at this point, if you want, you can make a cream cheese icing or something like that to put over the top, or just regular icing. Personally, I prefer cinnamon rolls without icing on them, which might be a little bit controversial, but for me they're more of like a breakfast thing, or I don't know, I don't like them to be too sickly sweet, so I don't do that. But what I'm going to do instead is I have some maple syrup, and I'm going to use this, I don't know what it's called, it's like a spread thing, to do like a maple syrup glaze on the top, so that will make them nice and shiny, and they'll still have that little bit of sweetness on the top, but they won't be too sickly. And I feel like maple syrup goes quite well with cinnamon, so that's what I'm going to do now. And it's best to do this when they're still hot, when they've just come out the oven, because obviously they're going to, because of the heat, then the maple syrup will form a glaze, whereas if you wait till they cool down, then it won't really glaze, it will just kind of sit on the top. So I'm doing them straight away now that they've come out the oven. They've risen really well, and when I'm putting the maple syrup on them, they feel really fluffy, so I'm sure they're still a success even if they're a little bit dark. So I've let the buns cool for about 10 minutes, and now it's time to try one. I've prepared, I've made myself a cup of tea I've actually recently got this mug from Anthropology, and I think it's so beautiful. It's a lovely orange colour, and it's got different pumpkins and squashes on it, and I think it's so pretty. And I've made a cup of Earl Grey tea in here, and I've also got an autumnal plate which I've prepared, which is a fox. And I got this actually many years ago from Laura Ashley. Which I don't know if they sell it anymore because it's so old, but the mug is new, so I've got a lovely autumn collection for my lovely fresh cinnamon rolls. I'll try to take one out without burning my hand. I'll get one out from the middle because they're always the best. Okay, well that just is perfect. I can already tell that this is amazing. Look how beautiful this cinnamon roll is. I don't know if you can see how fluffy and moist and gooey this is. Like, I know the top is hard, but oh my gosh, the middle is so... It's like a cloud, but really rich, and oh, I just need to try it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take a bite of it. Perfection. The flavour is actually incredible. And the texture hit the nail on the head. Like, it's fluffy and gooey, and if you need a cosy autumnal day reading a book in a cosy armchair with a cup of tea and a spiced baked treat, this is what you need to make. So go make this now and let me know if it's successful and what you think of it. I hope you enjoyed this cooking tutorial. If you did, then please like this video and subscribe to my channel to get more recipes like this. I always make things myself to show you how to do it and to show that it's easy to do. If you put a little bit of time and effort, then it's a perfect cozy activity to do at home. And yes, I'll see you next time. Bye. I'm gonna go in for another bite. Bye.